My wife laughed and said, "Stop being so emotional about my work trip. I'm not your property." I just said, "Noted." The next morning, she walked into the company I built to find her father and her lover staring white-faced at the man sitting in my chair. She didn't even kiss me goodbye. Not a peck on the cheek. Not one of those half-hearted hugs where you pat someone's back twice and pull away. Nothing. Just the sound of her designer suitcase wheels clicking across our marble entryway. Her phone already pressed to her ear, sunglasses perched on her head, even though it was 6 a.m. and still dark outside. "I'll text you when I land," she said without looking at me. Not a promise, just a statement like she was reading off a checklist. I stood there in my pajamas, coffee mug halfway to my lips, watching her adjust her Burberry scarf in the hallway mirror. She'd been up since 4:30. I'd heard her in the bathroom, the hair dryer, the clinking of makeup bottles. All that effort for a client meeting. "Are you sure the meetings need 4 full days?" I asked. My voice was calm. I'd practiced keeping it calm. She paused, not to think about her answer that would require actually considering my feelings. No. She paused to prepare her response. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her head tilted slightly to the right. That's her dealing with an inconvenience posture. Then she turned around and there it was. That smirk, the one that makes her look like she just won an argument you didn't know you were having. Her chin tilted up, lips curved in this theatrical way like she was performing for an invisible audience. "Stop being so emotional about my work trip," she said, each word carefully spaced like she was explaining something to a child. "I'm not your property." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I could feel them settling into my chest, heavy and acrid. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't do any of the things she probably expected, hoped for, even an emotional reaction she could screenshot and send to her friends later. Proof that her husband was controlling or insecure. I just looked at her, really looked at her and said one word. "Noted." Her smirk faltered for just a second, a micro-expression barely noticeable, like she'd expected more of a fight and didn't quite know what to do with my calm. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Her heels echoed down the hallway toward the elevator, and I stood there in our $4 million penthouse, surrounded by the life we'd built together, and felt something inside me shift, not break. Breaking implies something sudden, violent, uncontrolled. This was different. This was a gear clicking into place, a switch being flipped, a decision being made with the cold precision of a surgeon making the first incision. I walked to my study, the one room in the apartment she never entered because it was too boring and smelled like old paper. I pulled out the leather-bound folder from the second shelf, tucked behind a row of first edition Hemingways she'd bought for decoration and never read. The folder was labeled in silver foil, Contingency. She'd seen it once, maybe 2 years ago, and laughed. "Your weird disaster prep binder," she'd called it. "What are you preparing for? The apocalypse?" "Something like that," I'd said. I opened it now and flipped to the first page. Phase 1, Confirmation. Everything I needed was already there. Account numbers, contact information, documents I'd prepared months ago, some even years ago. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 4 years. It rang twice. "It's me," I said when he answered. "She's in motion. That's why I hired him. Begin protocol." I hung up and sat back in my leather chair, the one I'd sat in when I built my first company from nothing. When I was 26 and hungry and had something to prove, the morning light was starting to filter through the blinds, casting long shadows across my desk. By noon, 3 NDAs would be signed. By evening, I'd have confirmation of everything I suspected. And by the time she landed in Phoenix pretending to be at a client meeting, I'd already be 10 steps ahead of her. Let me back up and explain how I got here. It started 6 months ago, maybe longer, with little things I told myself I was imagining. We've been married for 8 years, together for 10. I met Sarah at a tech conference in Seattle where I was the keynote speaker. I just sold my second startup for 8 figures and was feeling pretty good about myself. She was there representing her father's marketing firm, beautiful and confident in a way that made everyone in the room turn and look when she walked by. She approached me after my talk, business card in hand, and said, "Your presentation was good, but your brand messaging needs work." I was intrigued. Most people at those events either wanted money or wanted to pitch me something. She wanted to critique me, so I took her to dinner, then another dinner. Then I flew to San Francisco to see her the next weekend. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married in Napa Valley at a vineyard that cost more than my first car. For the first few years, it was good, really good. We built things together. When I started my third company, the one that would become Meridian Technologies, she was there helping with branding, connecting me with investors through her father's network. Her father, Richard Chen, was old money, not the kind that talks about it, but the kind that just exists in country clubs and private equity firms and conversations that happen in rooms most people don't know exist. He'd built a small empire in commercial real estate and advisory services, and he had his fingers in a lot of pies. When Meridian started taking off, Richard introduced me to people, the right people, board members, investors, strategic partners. I was grateful. We brought him on as an advisory board member when we incorporated. It seemed like the right thing to do. He was family after all. Sarah joined the company too, initially just helping with marketing, but as we grew, her role expanded. Chief Brand Officer, then Chief Operating Officer. She was good at it, charming clients, managing relationships, being the face of the company, while I focused on the technical side. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 small things. The way she started staying late at the office more often. The way her team dinners became overnight trips to LA or Austin or Phoenix. The way she'd come home smelling like expensive hotel soap and someone else's cologne. But when I'd lean in to kiss her, she'd turn her head so I'd catch her cheek instead. The way she changed her phone passcode, then changed it again. The way she'd tilt her screen away from me when we were sitting on the couch, even though we used to share everything. "Why are you being so paranoid?" she'd say when I asked about it. "You're starting to sound crazy." Gaslighting, that's what they call it now, making someone doubt their own reality. But I'm not crazy. I'm careful. And I've built my entire career on reading data, identifying patterns, and acting on incomplete information before my competitors do. So 3 months ago, I hired someone, not a private investigator. Those guys are too obvious, too traceable. I hired a firm that specializes in corporate intelligence, the kind that Fortune 500 companies use when they suspect insider trading or IP theft. I gave them everything: her travel records, credit card statements, email metadata, phone logs. 2 weeks later, they came back with a preliminary report. Sarah had been traveling to the same cities at the same times as Daniel Ross, a mid-level operations manager in our company. Hired 6 months ago, age 32, previously worked for a consulting firm in Austin. Single LinkedIn profile full of the usual corporate buzzword soup. The trips matched up perfectly. When Sarah went to Austin for a brand summit, Daniel was there for operations training. When she went to Phoenix for investor meetings, he was there for a strategy session. They stayed in different hotels, used different credit cards, never posted about each other on social media. They were careful, but not careful enough because my team tracked their phones, and every single night of those trips between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., their devices were in the same location, the same hotel room. I sat in my study and stared at the report for an hour. There were photos, not graphic ones. These guys are professionals, but enough. Her laughing in a hotel bar, his hand on her lower back. The two of them walking through a hotel lobby, standing just a little too close. I felt nothing. That's the strange part. I thought I'd be angry or hurt or devastated, but instead I felt this cold clarity settle over me like ice water. I'd been right. The paranoia wasn't paranoia. The gut feeling wasn't anxiety. I'd been married to someone who was lying to me, and now I had proof. But here's the thing. Proof alone wasn't enough. In business, knowing something and being able to use it are two different things. You need leverage. You need positioning. You need to control the narrative before it controls you. So I didn't confront her. I went deeper. I asked my team to pull Daniel's hearing records. The answer came back fast. Richard Chen, Sarah's father. Daniel had been hired 2 weeks after Richard took a golf trip to Scottsdale, the same city where, according to phone records, Daniel lived at the time, the same city where Sarah had coincidentally attended a conference that same week. I pulled up Daniel's employee file. There was a note from HR, flagged for review, but never escalated. A complaint from his previous supervisor at his last job about inappropriate workplace conduct and boundary violations. The complaint had been dismissed as unfounded during his background check. Who dismissed it? Richard Chen during the final hearing approval. That's when I understood this wasn't just an affair. This was coordinated. Sarah hadn't just met some guy and fallen into something. This was planned, facilitated, enabled by her own father. Richard had always been involved in the company, but in the past year he'd been pushing harder, suggesting we bring in more outside board members, recommending specific investors, pushing for a merger with a competitor that would have diluted my ownership stake significantly. I'd resisted politely but firmly. This was my company. I'd built it. I wasn't interested in giving up control, and every time I pushed back, Sarah would come home and we'd have a fight. "You're being stubborn," she'd say. "My father is just trying to help. Why don't you trust him?" Now I saw it clearly. Richard wanted control. Sarah wanted what? Freedom. A divorce with a payout. A chance to push me out and install someone more manageable. Whatever they wanted, they'd made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. People think I'm paranoid. I've heard it my whole life. Why do you need 3 backup plans? Why are you so obsessed with worst-case scenarios? You need to relax, man. Not everything is going to fall apart. And when it does, the people who survive aren't the optimists. They're the ones who plan for the collapse. My first startup was a mobile app. Simple, elegant, growing fast. My co-founder was my best friend from college. We were going to change the world together, we said. We even had matching tattoos. Stupid, I know. Then one day I came into the office and found the locks changed. He'd registered the company in his name only, transferred all the IP, taken our entire investor list, and started a competing company overnight. I had nothing, no legal recourse, no ownership stake, no way to prove anything because I trusted him and never bothered with formal agreements. I was broke, humiliated, and stupid. But I learned never again would I enter a partnership without protection. Never again would I build something without a kill switch. Never again would I let trust replace strategy. So when I started Meridian Technologies, I built it differently. Layer 1, the company structure. Meridian wasn't a simple corporation. It was a network of entities. The main operating company, a separate IP holding company, an offshore entity that owned the patents, a trust that controlled voting rights, all interconnected, all carefully documented, all designed so that if something went wrong, I could isolate, protect, and control the assets that mattered. Sarah knew about some of this. She'd been there when we set it up, but she never paid attention to the details. "Legalese," she'd say, waving her hand dismissively whenever our lawyers tried to explain the structure. "Just tell me where to sign." Layer 2, documentation. Every significant decision, every agreement, every contract, I documented everything. Recorded board meetings, kept copies of emails, maintained a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Layer 3, people. I hired a shadow team not on the company books, paid through separate entities, a lawyer who specialized in corporate disputes, a financial strategist who'd worked for 3 Fortune 500 CEOs during divorces, a security consultant who used to work in military intelligence. They were expensive. They were worth it. And layer 4, the one I built after I started noticing the cracks in my marriage, the contingency plan. 2 years ago, during a company refinancing, we needed to restructure ownership. Sarah owned 15% of the company, a gift I'd given her on our 5th wedding anniversary. It made her a real stakeholder. "We're building this together," I'd said. Our lawyers drew up new shareholder agreements, 50 pages of legal language. Sarah skimmed maybe 3 of them. She was more interested in the celebratory brunch I'd planned afterward. On page 37, buried in subsection C of Article 6, was a clause I'd specifically requested. In the event of a verified breach of marital fidelity or fiduciary duty by any shareholder, all voting shares and beneficial ownership rights held by said shareholder shall immediately and irrevocably revert to the founding shareholder. This clause is binding and not subject to discretionary appeal. Sarah signed it with a fountain pen while sipping a mimosa. Her initials SC, her signature a looping, careless scrawl. The date March 15th, 2 years ago. That wasn't the only insurance policy I built. 6 months ago, I created something called the Morton Continuity Trust. I used my middle name. Sarah never remembered it. The trust was designed to hold my shares and voting rights in the event I was unable or unwilling to serve as active CEO. Who controlled the trust? A trustee I'd been quietly grooming for 3 years. Marcus Webb, former CEO of 2 major tech companies, now semi-retired but still sharp as hell. We'd met at a conference, became friends, played golf occasionally. Sarah had met him exactly once at a charity dinner and forgot his name immediately. Marcus didn't appear on our board, didn't attend our meetings. As far as anyone knew, he was just a casual acquaintance of mine. But he held a sealed letter in his safe, signed by me and witnessed by lawyers, giving him full authority to step in and execute the trust provisions. All he needed was my activation call, the one I made the morning Sarah left for her work trip. Her flight landed in Phoenix at 6:32 p.m. I know because I was tracking it, not in a creepy way. Well, maybe a little creepy, but we had a shared Apple ID for family features. She'd never bothered to change it. Why would she? She thought I was too dumb or too trusting to check. I sat at my desk and watched the little airplane icon descend into Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Then I watched her phone start moving. First through the airport, then onto a highway, then to a hotel. Not the Marriott where her client meetings were supposedly happening. That was downtown near the convention center. No, this was the Sanctuary Resort in Paradise Valley. 5-star. The kind of place you take someone you want to impress, not a client you're trying to close a deal with. I pulled up our credit card activity, the joint American Express we used for everything. 6:47 p.m. Sanctuary, Resort Scottsdale $892, room charge. 7:23 p.m. Elements Restaurant $267, $2 entrees, a bottle of wine, dessert. 11:18 p.m. Room service $94, champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. I sat back and stared at the screen. Part of me had been hoping I was wrong, that maybe the investigator's report was coincidence, that maybe I was being paranoid after all. But no, here it was. Documented, time-stamped, undeniable. My phone buzzed, a text from the investigator. Confirmation. Subject and secondary target are co-located, photos available if needed. I texted back, not necessary, proceed to phase 2. Phase 2 was financial isolation. While Sarah was busy enjoying her champagne, I was systematically locking her out of everything that mattered. First, the investment portal. We had a joint brokerage account with about $2.3 million in stocks and bonds. I changed the password, changed the security questions, changed the backup email. She tried to log in at 11:34 p.m. I got an alert. Failed login attempt. I smiled. Second, power of attorney. I'd given Sarah limited power of attorney 3 years ago for estate planning purposes. I revoked it, called my lawyer, had him file the paperwork immediately. By midnight, it was done. Third, the company access. Sarah had administrative privileges on our internal systems, email servers, financial dashboards. I contacted our IT director, someone I trusted completely, and had him begin a routine security audit that would temporarily suspend certain access levels. Her credentials would still work. She wouldn't know she'd been locked out of anything important until she tried to access something that mattered. Fourth, and most important, I activated the trust. I called Marcus at 8 p.m. "It's time," I said. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." All right, I'll file the paperwork in the morning. You won't be able to reverse this easily. I don't want to reverse it. There was a different pause then. I'm sorry it came to this. Me too. But I wasn't, not really. Because in that moment, sitting in my study with the city lights glowing outside my window, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Sarah didn't call that night. Not to say she'd landed safely. Not to check in. Nothing. The next morning I got a text at 9:47, long day of meetings, hope you're doing okay. I stared at it for a full minute, the casual dismissiveness of it. A fake concern like she was checking a box on her list of things a good wife should do. I didn't respond. At 11:23 a.m. another text. Are you ignoring me now? Still didn't respond. At 2:15 p.m. a phone call. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. At 4:30 p.m. she texted again. This is really immature. I finally replied, sorry, been busy with work. Talk when you're back. That would keep her calm, make her think I was just sulking, being the emotional husband she'd accused me of being. She'd expect me to be upset, maybe passive-aggressive, but ultimately manageable. She had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. While she was texting me, Marcus was filing trust documents with the corporate secretary. Our general counsel, someone I'd hired personally, someone who owed his career to me, was reviewing the shareholder agreement and flagging the fidelity clause. Our CFO, another loyalist, was preparing a report on irregular expense patterns that would be presented to the board. Not accusing anyone of anything yet, just raising questions, creating a paper trail. And our head of security was implementing new building protocols, biometric scanners, badge access changes, all framed as routine security upgrades, but strategically designed to create checkpoints and controls. Everything was moving quietly, methodically, like a chess game, where your opponent doesn't realize they're already in check. I spent that afternoon in my study, going through every detail one more time, looking for holes, anticipating counterarguments, planning 3 moves ahead. That night I barely slept, not from anxiety but from adrenaline. I kept running through scenarios in my head. What would she say? How would she react? What would Richard do? I had answers prepared for all of it. Sarah's flight landed Wednesday at 5:47 p.m. I know because I was still tracking it. I wasn't home when she arrived. I deliberately scheduled a late meeting at the office. She texted at 6:32 p.m. home. Where are you? I replied at 7:15 p.m. working late. No, glad you're home safe. Just facts, she called. I didn't answer. I stayed at the office until almost 10 p.m. not because I had work to do, but because I wanted her to feel what I'd been feeling for months. That distance, that coldness, that sense that something fundamental had shifted. When I finally got home, she was in the guest bedroom with the door closed. A light glowed underneath. I heard her on the phone, voice low, probably talking to someone about her difficult husband. I went to our bedroom, got ready for bed, and went to sleep or pretended to. The next morning, Thursday, was when everything would come together. Sarah got up early. I heard her in the bathroom. The usual morning routine, shower, hair, makeup. She was dressing for the office. I could tell by the sound of heels clicking on hardwood. I stayed in bed pretending to sleep until I heard the front door close. Then I got up, got dressed, and headed to the office an hour later. The plan was simple. Sarah would arrive at the office expecting a normal day. She'd try to go up to the executive floor and find herself stopped by new security. She'd be confused, maybe annoyed, but not alarmed yet. Then her father would get a call. He'd come down to meet her, and together they'd be escorted to the boardroom where they'd find Marcus sitting in my chair. I didn't go to the office. Instead, I went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and waited. My phone sat on the table in front of me, silent. At 8:47 a.m., I got a text from our head of security. Subject arrived. Protocol initiated. At 8:52 a.m., another text. Father en route. At 9:30 a.m., both subjects in boardroom. Marcus told me later, and I've replayed his description 100 times. Sarah walked into the building like she owned it. heels clicking, designer bag over her shoulder, sunglasses still on even though she was indoors. She nodded at the front desk and headed straight for the executive elevator. That's where she stopped. Two security guards, new guys she didn't recognize, stood in front of the elevator. They weren't the usual rent-a-cops. These were former military, clean-cut. The kind of guys who don't move unless they're told to move. "Excuse me," Sarah said, reaching for the elevator button. One of the guards raised his hand. "New security protocol, ma'am." She pulled her sunglasses down and looked at him like he just told her the earth was flat. "I'm the COO. I work here." "Badge access only, ma'am." She pulled out her badge and held it up. The guard looked at it, then at his tablet, then shook his head. "This badge isn't authorized for executive floor access." "What are you talking about? I've been using this badge for 3 years. System shows it was downgraded during the security audit. You'll need to contact IT department." Marcus told me her face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, then calculation. She pulled out her phone and called her father. Richard answered immediately. "What's wrong?" "There are guards blocking the elevator. They won't let me up. They're saying my badge doesn't work." Pause. "Something about a security audit. Do you know anything about this?" No, I'll stay there. I'm coming down." Richard appeared in the lobby about 3 minutes later. Marcus said he looked like he'd aged 10 years. Tie slightly crooked, hair not quite right, sweating even though the building was cool. "What the hell is going on?" he asked the guards. "Security protocol, sir. I'm on the advisory board. I've been with this company for 8 years." The guard looked at his tablet again. "Your badge shows active, sir. You can proceed." Richard looked at Sarah, then at the guards, then back at Sarah. Sarah was already texting someone, probably me, asking what was happening. I didn't respond. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Sarah stepped out and stopped immediately. Everything was different. Not dramatically different, but wrong in small ways that added up to something deeply unsettling. New carpet, different art on the walls. The receptionist's desk had been moved. Even the lighting seemed changed. "What the hell?" Sarah whispered. Richard looked pale. "This way." He led her toward the boardroom, but his hand was shaking when he reached for the door handle. Inside, sitting at the head of the table, my chair, the one I'd sat in for every board meeting for the past 6 years, was Marcus Webb. Silver hair, perfectly combed, charcoal suit, calm expression, reading from a folder like he'd been there his whole life. At the other end of the table sat Daniel Ross, Sarah's lover. Her secret, her liability. Daniel looked like he was about to throw up. His face was pale, his collar was damp with sweat, and his hands were clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. Sarah stood in the doorway for a solid 5 seconds, just staring. "Where's my husband?" she finally said. Marcus looked up from his folder. Not quickly, not with any particular emotion. Just looked up like someone had asked him the time. "Not here," he said simply. "Who are you?" "Marcus Webb, acting trustee of the Morton Holdings Trust." He gestured to a chair along the side wall. "You're welcome to observe today's meeting. Please have a seat." "Observe?" Sarah's voice went up an octave. "I'm the COO. I run this company." Marcus smiled slightly, not unkindly but not warmly either, like a doctor about to deliver bad news. "No," he said. "You were the COO. As of yesterday afternoon, your operational authority has been suspended pending an ethics review." The room went silent. Sarah looked at her father. Richard looked at the floor. "Dad," he didn't respond. "Dad, say something." Richard finally looked up. His eyes were red. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Didn't know what?" Marcus closed his folder. "Perhaps I should explain. Mr. Chen, Mr. Ross, would you like to add anything before I continue?" Daniel shook his head rapidly. Didn't even make eye contact with Sarah. Richard just said, "Please, let's hear it." Marcus opened a second folder. 3 months ago, the company initiated a routine audit of executive expenses and travel patterns. This is standard practice for companies of our size, particularly when considering expansion or investment opportunities. Sarah was shaking her head. This is insane. I want to talk to my husband right now. Your husband, Marcus said calmly, transferred his operational authority to the Morton Trust 6 months ago. The trust was officially activated 72 hours ago. He is no longer involved in day-to-day company operations. The same agreement you signed 2 years ago. Marcus slid a document across the table. Sarah picked it up with shaking hands. It was the shareholder agreement. Highlighted in yellow was Article 6, subsection C, the fidelity clause. Her face went white. The audit, Marcus continued, revealed a pattern of coordinated travel between you and Mr. Ross. Same cities, same dates, often same hotels. Though you were careful to book separate rooms. Daniel made a sound like a wounded animal. We have credit card receipts, phone records, security footage from hotel lobbies, GPS data, all legally obtained, all admissible. Sarah's hands were trembling now. You can't. Article 6, subsection C, Marcus said, clearly states that any verified breach of marital fidelity or fiduciary duty results in immediate forfeiture of voting shares and operational authority. Your signature is on page 37. He pulled out another document, a photo this time. Sarah and Daniel at a hotel bar, his hand on her back, her leaning in clothes. Timestamp in the corner. This was taken 4 days ago in Phoenix at the Sanctuary Resort, not at the Marriott where your supposed client meetings were scheduled. Sarah dropped the photo like it burned her. Additionally, the audit revealed that Mr. Ross was hired under unusual circumstances, recommended by Mr. Chen, fast-tracked through HR. A previous workplace complaint was dismissed during his background check, also by Mr. Chen. Richard's head dropped into his hands. This suggests not just infidelity but coordinated corporate misconduct, potentially nepotism, potentially fraud. This is entrapment, Sarah said, her voice cracking. You set me up. No, Marcus said. Your husband built protection into the company structure. You triggered the protection by violating its terms. There's a difference. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. As acting trustee, I'm authorizing a full ethics investigation. During this investigation, Ms. Chen, your access to company systems, facilities, and confidential information is suspended. Your compensation will continue pending the investigation's outcome. You may retain counsel. I want to talk to my husband. He's aware of the situation. Where is he? Sarah didn't leave the building right away. Marcus told me she sat in the boardroom for almost 20 minutes after he left, just staring at the table. Her father tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't respond. Just sat there, silent, processing what had just happened. His badge was deactivated the moment he hit the lobby. He'd already been placed on administrative leave. Eventually, security had to escort Sarah out. Not forcefully, she went willingly, but they had to guide her to the elevator because she seemed confused about where she was going. I watched it all happen from my phone. Our security system had cameras everywhere and I'd been given remote access. I sat in that coffee shop and watched her walk through the lobby like a ghost, her face blank. Her usual confidence completely shattered. Part of me felt bad for maybe 5 seconds. Then I remembered the smirk, the stop being so emotional comment, the way she'd lied to my face for months. The feeling passed. Over the next week, everything fell apart for her in slow motion. She tried to access her company email, locked out. She tried to log into the financial dashboards, credentials invalid. She called the HR director to complain about wrongful termination. He politely informed her that she hadn't been terminated, just placed on investigative leave. Different thing entirely. She hired a lawyer, expensive one. He reviewed the shareholder agreement and the trust documents and apparently told her, "You don't have a case." This was legally bulletproof. She tried to call me 17 times the first day. I didn't answer. She sent texts, started normal. We need to talk, then angry. You can't just do this. Then desperate, please, I'm sorry, can we just talk? I responded once. Speak to Marcus, he's handling everything. She showed up at our apartment building. I wasn't there. I'd moved into a hotel for the week. Security stopped her at the front desk. I'd had the locks changed that morning. Her father tried to contact me. Left voicemails, sent emails, finally cornered Marcus at his golf club and demanded a meeting. Marcus agreed. They met for coffee. Richard apparently spent an hour trying to negotiate, trying to find some loophole, some way to unwind everything. Marcus listened patiently, then said, "Your daughter violated the ethics charter. Your involvement in hearing her lover created a conflict of interest, and your attempts to influence board decisions while she was compromising company integrity make you a liability. You're being removed from the advisory board effective immediately." Richard tried to argue, tried to threaten legal action, tried to pull the "I helped build this company" card. Marcus just said no. He built this company. You helped yourself to its influence. There's a difference. And that was it. By the end of the week, both Sarah and Richard were completely cut off from the company. Daniel had been terminated for ethics violations, and Marcus was running day-to-day operations with the full backing of the board and the trust. Everything I'd built, the contingency plans, the legal structures, the careful documentation had worked exactly as designed. Sarah was effectively powerless. Her shares meant nothing without voting rights. Her position was gone. Her father's influence was gone. Her lover was gone. She had nothing except one last move. I underestimated her just once, but once was almost enough. 2 weeks after the boardroom meeting, I got a call from Marcus. "We have a problem," he said. "What kind of problem?" "Sarah filed a lawsuit. Civil court. She's saying you manipulated her into signing the shareholder agreement, that you deliberately hid the fidelity clause, that you conducted illegal surveillance to gather evidence against her, and that you're using the trust structure to illegally seize marital assets." I felt my chest tighten. Is any of that true? No, but it doesn't matter. She's not trying to win. She's trying to create leverage. The lawsuit names you, me, the company, and the trust. She's asking for a temporary injunction to freeze all trust activities pending the outcome. Can she do that? A judge might grant it temporarily. If she can convince them there's potential fraud, they'll halt everything until it gets sorted out. That could take months. I closed my eyes. This was smart. Smarter than I'd given her credit for. She couldn't win inside the company structure. It was too airtight. So she was attacking from outside, using the court system to create chaos and delay. "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight it, but I need you to come back. We need you visible, present, defending yourself. Hiding makes you look guilty." "I haven't been hiding. You've been invisible. That's basically the same thing." He was right. I'd been so focused on the strategic maneuvers that I'd forgotten about optics, about narrative, about the fact that in court perception matters as much as facts. "When's the hearing?" "Friday, 3 days. I'll be there." I spent the next 2 days with lawyers, real ones this time. Not just corporate counsel, but litigators, the kind who defend CEOs during shareholder disputes and divorce proceedings. They reviewed everything. The shareholder agreement, the trust documents, the investigation reports, the evidence of Sarah's affair. "This is solid," my lead lawyer said. "She doesn't have a case, but she's got enough to make noise." "Can we shut it down?" "We can try, but judges don't like dismissing cases before hearing arguments, especially when there's allegations of fraud. We'll probably have to go through at least a preliminary hearing. Then let's make sure we win the hearing." We prepared. I reviewed my deposition answers, practiced my testimony, made sure every document was organized, every timeline was clear, every piece of evidence was ready to present. Friday came. I walked into the courthouse for the first time in 15 years. The last time had been for a contract dispute with a supplier. I'd won that case. I planned to win this one too. Sarah was already there sitting with her lawyer at the plaintiff's table. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair wasn't styled the way it usually was, and she wore a simple black suit instead of her usual designer clothes. When I walked in, she looked up. Our eyes met for the first time in 2 weeks. I couldn't read her expression. Anger, fear, regret, maybe all three. I sat down at the defendant's table. Marcus was there along with our legal team. We looked like what we were, prepared, professional, in control. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Sarah's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a manipulative husband who trapped his wife in a predatory contract, then used private investigators to destroy her life when she tried to build a career independent of him. It was compelling. I'll give him that. He made me sound like a villain. Then my lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the plaintiff's claims rest on a fundamental misunderstanding of corporate governance and contract law. Mrs. Chen signed a shareholder agreement negotiated by independent counsel, reviewed over several weeks, and executed in the presence of a notary that she now claims to have not understood. This is not fraud. This is buyer's remorse. He presented the documents, showed the timeline, pointed out that Sarah had her own lawyer review the agreement before signing it, demonstrated that the fidelity clause was clearly stated, properly formatted, and fully enforceable. Then he addressed the surveillance claims. The investigation was conducted by a licensed corporate security firm using only legal methods, no wiretaps, no hacking, no illegal entry, just observation, public records, and analysis of company-owned credit card data. Everything was obtained properly and is fully admissible. He showed the judge the photos, the credit card statements, the hotel records, all of it legal, all of it damning. Finally, he addressed the trust. The Morton Trust was established 6 months ago, long before any investigation began. It's a standard estate planning tool used by founders to ensure business continuity. Its activation was triggered by predefined conditions in the shareholder agreement. Conditions Mrs. Chen agreed to when she signed the document. The judge listened to everything, took notes, asked a few questions, then she said, "I'm ready to rule." My heart pounded. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate sufficient evidence of fraud or illegality to justify an injunction. The shareholder agreement appears to be properly executed. The investigation appears to have been conducted legally, and the trust structure appears to be a legitimate business mechanism. Sarah's face crumbled. However, the judge continued, I'm troubled by some of the circumstances here, the timing, the coordination, the severity of the consequences. This feels less like contract enforcement and more like orchestrated revenge. I felt my stomach drop. Therefore, I'm ordering both parties to enter mandatory mediation before this proceeds any further. You'll work with a court-appointed mediator to reach a settlement. If you can't reach an agreement within 60 days, we'll schedule a full trial. The gavel came down. Mediation, not a win, not a loss, somewhere in between. I looked at Sarah. She was crying silently, her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just exhaustion. Mediation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of sitting in sterile conference rooms while lawyers argued over numbers, and a mediator tried to find common ground. Sarah wanted money, a lot of it. She claimed she'd been instrumental in building the company and deserved compensation for her contributions. Her lawyer threw around terms like intellectual property contribution and brand development value. My lawyer countered with evidence of her limited actual involvement. Showed that most of her contributions were either delegated to subordinates or outsourced to contractors. Demonstrated that the company's growth had been driven by technical innovation and sales. My department's, not hers. The mediator listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, and finally said, here's reality. Mrs. Chen signed an agreement that's legally enforceable. She violated that agreement. She has no legal claim to the shares or the company. Sarah's lawyer tried to object. The mediator held up a hand, but she continued, Mr. Chen could have handled this differently. He could have confronted her, filed for divorce, negotiated a separation. Instead, he executed a corporate takeover of his own marriage. That's unusual. It was strategic, my lawyer said. It was cruel, the mediator replied. Legal but cruel. She looked at both of us. You can keep fighting this, spend hundreds of thousands on legal fees, drag this out for years, destroy what's left of your reputations and your relationship, or you can settle this now, walk away, and move on with your lives. She slid a document across the table. Here's my recommendation, Mr. Chen. You buy out Mrs. Chen's shares at fair market value. You give her 6 months of severance to transition. You both sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. You file for no-fault divorce, and you never speak to each other again. I looked at the number on the paper, not company-destroying but painful. I thought about grinding her down even further, about winning completely. Then I looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She looked broken, defeated, small. And I realized something. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted to be free. I'll accept it, I said. Sarah looked up surprised. On one condition, I added. Your father is never involved in any business I'm associated with ever. That's non-negotiable. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. And Daniel Ross is blacklisted from our industry. I'll make calls. He'll never work in tech again. That's non-negotiable. She closed her eyes. Fine. We signed the papers that afternoon. Just like that, 8 years of marriage dissolved into a stack of legal documents and a wire transfer. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. No fault, no drama, just paperwork. Sarah took the settlement money and moved to Austin. I heard through mutual friends that she started a consulting business. Something about brand strategy. I don't know if it's successful. I don't ask. Richard was forced to resign from every board he sat on. Word got around about his involvement in hearing Daniel and covering up the ethics complaints. He's not blacklisted exactly, but he's damaged. No one trusts him anymore. Daniel ended up working at a car dealership in Phoenix. He tried to sue me for defamation. His lawyer dropped the case after reviewing the evidence. Marcus stayed on as a board member and strategic advisor. We still play golf sometimes. The company is doing fine, better than fine, actually. Turns out removing toxic people from leadership creates space for competent people to grow. We promoted 3 VPs in the last year. All of them are excellent. I live in a different apartment now. Smaller, but I like it better. No memories, no ghosts, just space to think and build and move forward. People ask me if I have regrets, if I think I went too far, if I should have handled it differently. Honestly, no. Could I have just confronted Sarah when I first suspected something? Sure. Marriage counseling, had tearful conversations, tried to work it out, but here's what I learned. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When someone lies to you, manipulates you, undermines you while smiling to your face, they're not making a mistake. They're making a choice. She chose to work with her father to undermine my company. Those weren't accidents. Those were decisions. I just made better decisions in response. Ruthless. They're not wrong. But in business, and marriage is a kind of business, whether people want to admit it or not, you survive by planning ahead, protecting your assets, and executing when necessary. I built something. She tried to take it. I stopped her. It's really that simple. 6 months after the divorce, I got an email from Sarah. The subject line was just, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The email was short. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't have the right to apologize after everything, but I need to say this. I was wrong. Not just about the affair, though obviously that was wrong, but about everything. About taking you for granted. About thinking I could manipulate you. About underestimating you. You built something incredible, and instead of being your partner, I tried to use you. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were always 3 steps ahead, and you were right to protect yourself. I hope you're doing well. I hope you build something even bigger next. Signed S. I read it twice, then I closed it and moved it to a folder I'd created just for closure. Things I needed to see but didn't need to keep in my inbox. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The past was the past, but I did think about it for a few days, about whether I'd been right or whether I'd just been vindictive, about whether there was a difference. I decided there was, because I didn't destroy her out of revenge. I destroyed her access to my life, my company, my trust. But I gave her the settlement money. Let her walk away with something. Could have left her with nothing if I'd wanted to be truly cruel. Instead, I just wanted to be free. And sometimes freedom requires burning bridges, cutting ties, building walls. I don't regret it. 2 years later, I sold Meridian Technologies for 9 figures, retired at 40, started angel investing in other people's companies, helping founders who reminded me of my younger self, hungry, ambitious, and maybe a little paranoid. I never remarried. Date occasionally, but mostly I focus on building things, investing in things, helping things grow. And I keep that leather folder in my study. The contingency plan updated quarterly. Different targets. Now business partners, investors, people who might try to take advantage. Because the thing about survival is this: hope for the best, plan for the worst, document everything. And when someone shows you they're willing to betray you, believe them the first time. I learned that lesson once. I'll never need to learn it again. Update for everyone asking, did she ever try to come back? Yeah, she did. About 3 years after the divorce, I got a call from an unknown number. Didn't recognize it. Almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Sarah. She was crying. Said she'd made a huge mistake, that she'd been in therapy and realized she'd sabotaged the best thing in her life, that she wanted to try again, start over, be better. I listened to the whole thing, didn't interrupt, let her say everything she needed to say. When she finished, there was this long silence. Then I said, I appreciate you calling. I hope therapy is helping. I hope you're building a good life, but we're done. We've been done and we're going to stay done. I wish you well. Goodbye, Sarah. I hung up, blocked the number. Never heard from her again. Some bridges once burned should stay burned. Tell us in the comments that the revenge was good or was too harsh or just right. Also feel free to share your story in the comment section. Kindly like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.